Welcome back, everybody. This is Days of Noah number 63, and today we're going to talk about the Large Hadron Collider, which is known as Cern. And Cern is probably the biggest technological advancement that's ever been facilitated by human beings since the beginning of recorded history. And essentially what it is a 17-mile circuit that's underground. It's deep, deep inside of the belly of the earth. It's located on the border of France and Switzerland. And what scientists are using it for is that they are shooting subatomic particles at each other at the speed of light. So they're injecting one subatomic particle this direction, the other one's coming around this direction. They're traveling at the speed of light. When they finally collide into each other, we see quantum physics on a level that we've never understood before, and the scientists are able to now utilize this experiment to understand the origins of the universe. They describe events such as mega black holes and alternate parallel universes that are being opened up, and it's a very high-tech scientific concept that they describe. And the reason why it's important is we have to understand that although mankind would like to believe that this is all their own ingenuity, it's going to become quite clear that Satan and the fallen angels and the demonic realm have been working through mankind for a long time to help produce Cern, because as we're going to see, Cern is going to be very important in the last days when it comes to opening up the bottomless pit in Revelation 9 and allowing the locust scorpions to come into our plane of existence and to facilitate and to trigger the apocalypse of the book of Revelation. Now that's quite a statement to make, and if you were to do a literature search on CERN, you'd see that there's a lot of brothers and sisters in Christ who have confirmed this understanding, and so that's helpful for us because there's a lot of different people who have been given a lot of different knowledge and understanding about this technology. And so the other thing we have to understand is that the enemy always works with symbols. That's how the New World Order is. That's how the Illuminati is. They're into the occult. And the word occult means hidden but in plain sight. And so that's how Satan does it. It's right there under your nose in the symbols. And to begin with, we see CERN's official symbol, which is this symbol here, which when you take that symbol apart, actually makes 3 6s, which stands for 666, the number of the beast. Now, that'll become relevant as the lecture proceeds forward. So before we get into CERN, I want to expound on this idea about symbols and how important they are through a concept known as theurgy. And theurgy is basically a fancy word for magic, but specifically it involves magic rituals and magic symbols, magic numbers, numerology, things like that. And a lot of people have made statements like this man down at the bottom: magic is just the science that we don't understand yet. And I never understood that for a long time, but now I finally understand it. We've been operating under a belief system that magic was some kind of hocus pocus voodoo and that there wasn't any science behind it. But as I've revealed in some past lectures, it has everything to do with quantum physics. And the world didn't understand quantum physics more than 100 years ago. So for the last 5,000 to 6,000 years, it just looked like some weird magic was taking place. But now that we have the understanding of quantum physics, we're beginning to realize that magic isn't just some voodoo. Magic is the science of quantum physics, and that there are things happening on the quantum physical level that precipitate and allow the magic to work. Now, the definition of theurgy is the practice of combining magic rituals and symbols for the purpose of invoking the presence of one or more spirits with the goal of achieving kenosis with the spirits. That is, humanity uniting with the divine. That's where the as above, so below principles of the secret societies come about. That what happens in the heavenlies is manifesting and controlling what happens in the physical realm. That's what theurgy is about. Now, a symbol is the reflection or shadow of a higher reality. These symbols don't just appear out of a vacuum. They have a meaning. That's what a symbol is. It symbolizes something. It has a meaning and it has a purpose. And the symbol is that in which the archetype it represents predominates over the symbol in such a way that the symbol is a direct extension of the source. See, the symbol is a direct extension of the source. For example, the goat of Mendes down here in the five-pointed star. This is a pentagram. That pentagram is just not a symbol that's written on a piece of paper or on a wall, but it's the direct extension of its source, which is Baphomet. And Baphomet is the official symbol for the Church of Satan. And there's a lot of deep meaning to that symbol. And so we have to understand the importance of these symbols. Now, going back to ancient times, the Pythagorean and the Platonic traditions, divine symbols have transformative and elevating power. There's power associated to these symbols. That makes them charged. And that sometimes they also refer to these symbols as talismans. A talisman is a charged object or a charged symbol or a sigil. We've talked about sigils in the past. Many lectures ago, we looked at the band Coil. They put charged sigils all over their music, their albums, because they know that it has a spiritual power over those who carry it and listen to it. So there are divine principles and powers that appear and become visible through images, numbers, and sounds, which are all being used as symbols. So, the take-home message is that symbols have occult hidden power and energy, vibration, frequency, and energy, spiritual energy that's associated with them.
The other interesting thing is that the religion of the 21st century has basically become science. We have many secular humanists and secular atheists who no longer subscribe to biblical teachings. They no longer subscribe to the idea of creationism from the biblical understanding. And so they've found a new religion to put their faith and trust in, and that religion is science. And obviously there's a lot of merit to science, but there's a lot of wiggle room in science as well. And, they have all their theories and their hypotheses and things like that, and they spend their time in their labs looking under the microscope and under the telescope. But there's still a lot of theory that's just that. And, when you really investigate a lot of different science, there's a lot of things that can be proven, and there's a lot of things that cannot be proven. And nonetheless, they still put their faith and trust in things, even things that they haven't proven. And so, these guys are, they remind me of someone driving down the freeway in a vehicle where this particular car happens to have a blind spot. And when you look over your right shoulder, you can't quite see the other lane. Now, just because you don't see a car over there doesn't mean that there's not a car in that lane. That's what we refer to as a blind spot. Most of today's scientists are so caught up in the science that they tend to have a blind spot when it comes to anything of faith or spirituality. And so this has become their particular religion of the masses today.
Now let's take a look at some of the details of Cern. Number one, it is the world's biggest machine that's ever been manufactured by human beings since the beginning of recorded history. It's cost over $9 billion to make it. Over 85 countries have contributed in its formation, so it's been a worldwide event. Now that 17-mile circuit is 575 feet underground. That's 175 meters that they've put that tunnel into the belly of the earth for 17 miles in circumference. That's pretty astounding, actually. Cern was basically inspired in its development in 1953. Now, this was an era where mankind was really becoming endowed in quantum physics and technology. That's the same timeline that Watson and Crick discovered the double alpha helix DNA strand. And so we see that the enemy is working through a lot of different people at the same time, bringing about a lot of different understandings in technology. Now, what's interesting about Cern is that this is where humanity has really discovered everything that we know about subatomic particles. So in essence, you could say that this is really the birth of quantum physics, this machine, Cern. And they're looking for something called the Higgs boson, which is the technological name for it. But the layman's term that they use for it is that it's also known as the God particle. That's what they're in pursuit of through Cern. They're looking for the God particle. Now you say, what is the God particle? Well, modern scientists today subscribe to the Big Bang Theory. They believe that at the beginning of time, there was this infinitesimal single dot, if you will, this one atom, I guess you'd call it, and that the conditions were right for that atom to explode and expand, and just like with an atomic bomb, there's so much energy and power that's being released from that subatomic particle that this was the beginning of the formation of gases and solids and liquids, and the formation of the entire universe. The entire cosmological makeup, they believe, comes from this Big Bang Theory. Now, I have no idea if the Big Bang Theory is accurate or not. That doesn't sound a whole lot different than what it says right out of the gate in the book of Genesis. In the book of Genesis, it says that God said, "Let there be light," and boom, there was light, and everything began to come into formation. And so, in my mind, the Big Bang Theory doesn't discredit anything that the scripture says. In fact, they appear to run parallel to each other. Even though they're trying to understand the Big Bang Theory, they still haven't gotten to the point where they acknowledge that someone had to still start it all. In other words, someone had to strike the match that lit that light and let that atomic structure begin to expand in such a way that the universe was formed. Now, the ironic thing about this whole process is that the vast majority of these people are atheists. They're secular humanists. They're evolutionists. They don't literally believe in a true higher power and intelligent designer like God. So it's kind of ironic that they call it the God particle, because in essence, that's an oxymoron. They don't believe in God. Now, one of the things that the scientists, including Stephen Hawking, who is one of the greatest nuclear physicists and theoretical physicists that's ever lived, they all admit openly that when these subatomic particles run into each other, they actually open up a portal or a black hole. That's their exact words. That Cern opens up a portal or a black hole to another dimension, or a parallel universe, if you will, and that they want to send information through, and they're also trying to gather and receive information from the other side, from this alternate dimension. Now let me assure you, I'm not making this stuff up. Here's an article down here. Finding the God particle could destroy the universe, warned Stephen Hawking. The Higgs boson God particle could destroy the universe, says Hawking. Space and time could suddenly collapse and we would not even see it coming. If scientists put too much energy into the Higgs boson, the universe could end. Disaster very unlikely as physicists do not have large enough collider. Well, that's debatable. So, you know, Stephen Hawking's a theoretical physicist and one of the smartest men on the planet. And he says that the God particle could create a catastrophic vacuum, a black hole, if you will, that would cause the collapsing of time and space as we know it, and would suck everything in the universe into it, destroying the entire universe. So that's a pretty powerful concept. Also, scientists have confirmed that Einstein's supermassive black hole theory exists. I want you to notice this image. We're going to see that later when we look at the video on Cern. So these concepts are real. They may sound like science fiction, but they are now science fact. And Cern is going to be used to achieve these things. Now, what's really interesting about Cern is it happens to be the birthplace of the World Wide Web. And you know, we've gotten desensitized about the internet because we've been living in an internet era now for 20 years. But we have to put things into context. Mankind has been on the planet for thousands of years, and they've never had the World Wide Web. And now we do. And unfortunately, it's very easy for human beings to become complacent and desensitized about things. Since we're used to having the internet and that's part of our way of life, we tend to diminish what an amazing technological structure it is. Now, interestingly enough, there is a little bit of hidden symbolism in the World Wide Web because as it stands, www, when you use gematria in Hebrew, actually translates as 666. We see that down here when we look at the Hebrew letters. This letter here is known as a tav or vav. And notice that it's the VW. And Hebrew is an amazing language. It's an alphanumeric language, just like Roman numerals have letters associated with them. Same thing with Hebrew. This letter has a number associated with it. So it can represent a W or it can represent a 6. So if I put 3 of these dashes side by side like we see over here on the Monster Energy drink, we can read that through the language or through the number structure. The language would be tav 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 or www, and the number would be 666. That's why it says Monster Unleash the Beast. And I've done some previous lectures kind of expounding upon the occult nature of this drink. So, when we see www. whatever, that www from a spiritual standpoint in the Hebrew can actually represent 666.com, so to speak. Now, obviously, that's an important number. We know that 6 is the number of the beast. We know that 6 is the number of a man, the Antichrist. And 6 in general is the number for humanity anyway. Man was created on the 6th day. And interestingly enough, if you look at the carbon-based life forms such as man, like we see here in this image, man is made up of 6 electrons, 6 protons, and 6 neutrons. So, 6 is clearly the number of a man. Now, I've always said that the World Wide Web is an absolute essential criteria for setting up a one-world beast system.
Because without the Internet of Things and the huge network that can absorb all of the data coming from the entire planet, you can never have all of the people and the currency and the system connected. It would be virtually impossible. So, the World Wide Web, which was created by Cern, is an absolute prerequisite for the Mark of the Beast system in the last days. That you can be sure of. And as I like to say, who else could possibly spin a World Wide Web? That's an interesting expression. That's something that a spider does, right? A spider lays back and it spins a huge web to catch its prey in. You know, the fly's flying around, he doesn't even see it, and then boom. Once he gets stuck in it, it's too late. He's already in it. And so I think there is some deeper symbolism there. Now, I don't want to digress too much, but we see this symbolism in other areas. For example, we know that there was the Twin Towers. And we know that when those Twin Towers were struck and went down, that represented the world trade and commerce of the whole planet. That was really the coming out party for the New World Order, because that was the beginning of all kinds of changes in the world, especially in America. We see things like the Patriot Act and the National Defense Authorization Act and many other things that come about of that, TSA and FEMA and Homeland Security. Basically, the origin of the Big Brother police state was this event of 9/11. Now, it's not a coincidence that in response to the Twin Tower attacks, they erected this right here. Down here we see it, the One World Trade Center. What they're implying symbolically is that these individual nation states that have their own currencies and their own policies, we're moving away from that, and we're moving into an era of globalism with a one world structure. And we see that with the right side up pyramid and the upside down pyramid of this One World Tower, which represents the as above, so below hybridized integration of the system. Now, when they did the inauguration of the One World Tower, it's interesting that they called it that, because even in its name, One World, they're implying that we're getting ready to move to an era of globalism for a one world state. But Barack Obama signed on this large banner right here, "We remember, we rebuild, we come back stronger." And what do you notice? The way he wrote it is very interesting. And we just discussed what W's mean. There is a hidden 666 right here. Now, I realize on the surface there are going to be people that say, come on, you got to have more than that. But again, you got to understand how the occultists work. This is how they work. They shroud things in numbers, letters, and symbols. And if you've really done any vetting on Barack Obama's past and his history, then this shouldn't surprise you. Now, something else that's amazing about Cern is that it's composed of 9,600 supermagnets, which are 100,000 times more powerful than the gravitational pull of Earth. Think about that for a second. That means that Cern is acting like a planetary body. We know that all cosmological bodies, planets, stars, comets, that they have their own gravitational pull. And the idea that this machine underneath the ground within inside of the planet has a gravitational pull that's 100,000 times more powerful than the entire Earth, that's really saying something. And you have to keep this in context of where we're going with this lecture. What I've said in the past is that Cern is going to be used to open up the bottomless pit. And if you've seen any of the previous lectures in the last 3, 4, 5 lectures, we've talked about one of the important aspects of the bottomless pit is when the planet Wormwood, the comet, comes down
and begins to cause all kinds of astronomical effects on the planet Earth. It's going to cause weather impacts. It's going to cause polar shifts. It's going to start triggering volcanic activity, earthquake activity, the movement of the tectonic plates, etc. And I said that that cosmological body, wormwood, which is mentioned in Revelation 9, that it has a supernatural spiritual angel or archon attributed to it, and that angel is Apollyon, the angel of the bottomless pit. He's the king of the locust scorpion hordes that are waiting in the pit to get out. And so you can't help but wonder if some of the hidden nature of Cern through these supermagnets and this tremendous gravitational pull could somehow be used to be drawing wormwood towards us. Wormwood's not going to just pop up out of the blue. As we speak, it's out there. It's out there in our universe right now, hidden behind the sun. It's at the right ecliptical to the earth where it can't be visualized very easily. God's allowed it that way for a reason. And as we speak, every day it's getting closer and closer to the planet. When the prophetic time is right, it will begin to enter Earth's atmosphere as we enter into the last days and as Jesus Christ continues to open up the seals, and eventually wormwood will be upon us. And the question is Cern having any possible impact on drawing it towards us? I don't know. That's just a question that I'm posing. Now, another very important detail that we're going to try and unpack as the lectures go on is that Cern is trying to uncover what they refer to as dark matter and dark energy. And that's going to become very important when we look at some of the occult writings of Aleister Crowley, the Brotherhood of Saturn, and all of the witchcraft that they've been performing for a long time. The other very and extremely important detail that we're going to look at is the fact that the official symbol for Cern is the Hindu god Shiva. And the Hindu god Shiva is known as the destroyer of worlds. And that's going to become very relevant moving forward. Now, the fact that Cern's official symbol is this Hindu god Shiva, this creator and destroyer of worlds, that's a very pertinent and important detail. We've already demonstrated that these occultists work through the symbols. So, why on earth have they chosen this symbol as their official symbol? We need to take a moment and really look closely at Shiva. So, according to Hindu mysticism, Shiva is shown as the source of all motion within the cosmos. He's also known as the Lord of the Doomsday Dance. I think that's very interesting. He's an apocalyptic type god because when he cranks up these arms, he's got many, many arms. When he cranks up these arms and they start moving, then he enters into an era where this dance, this doomsday dance, is being performed. Now, the dance is called the Nataraja. He's the Lord of the dance, or the Nataraja. It's also referred to as the ecstatic dancer. And we'll look at that in a moment. But basically, the doomsday dance is represented by the Arch of Flames, which accompanies the dissolution of the universe at the end of an age or an eon. So, for example, the New Age, they believe that we're leaving the age of Pisces. That's what Aleister Crowley used to write in some of his writings when he was talking about that we were entering into the age of Horus. And we're now moving into the Golden Age, or the New Age, the age of Aquarius. So there's a new eon that's upon mankind. And so naturally, this god, Shiva, is going to have to perform this doomsday dance, which in essence ushers us out of the old age and into a new age. Now, when you look at Shiva symbols, they're very important. First, we've got the crescent moon and the serpent around the neck. You can see here, here's the serpent. Now, we've done many lectures on Eastern mysticism. This serpent represents the Kundalini spirit. They say that that is the serpent that's coiled at the base of the spine, and as you do the initiations and you do the transcendental meditation, the serpent rises up the spine, up the chakras, until it eventually reaches the pineal gland, or the third eye, which you can see he has lit up right here on his forehead. And eventually it leads to the Kundalini awakening. Now, the third eye represents soul travel along the spiritual realm. So Shiva is a god who's representing this spiritual realm where, from a biblical standpoint, Satan and the demonic exist. We're talking about the second heaven now. And it's interesting that they've chosen Shiva to be their official symbol. So we see this here. If you were to travel to Cern, Switzerland, where the headquarters of Cern is, that's in Geneva, then this is what you would see in the front. You can see that they've got a sitting area out here where people can eat lunch and hang out, and there's this large statue of Shiva. Now, one of the interesting things about Shiva is that in the back right hand, he's holding something called the Damaru. The Damaru, which we see right here, that is a drum-shaped instrument that looks exactly like an hourglass, and it represents the rhythm and the time of the universe. Now, time is very important. When we're talking about using Cern and shooting subatomic particles into each other and creating black holes, we're talking about breaking the boundaries of the speed of light. We're talking about opening up doorways into the time-space continuum. And so we're talking about altering the fourth dimension of time. So that's one of the relevant reasons why they chose Shiva, because Shiva represents the time of the universe. Now, it's interesting that Shiva represents time, and he uses this drum, this hourglass drum, to display the time, because that's very similar to what we see in Western occultism. In Western occultism, men like Aleister Crowley, who started the Brotherhood of Saturn, they describe Saturn as the god of time. And over the centuries, Saturn would become known as the Grim Reaper. The Grim Reaper is the one who carries the sickle, and he's the one who shows up in the end, and he does his own version of the apocalypse, in that he brings destruction and dissolution of the universe as well. And also, if you look at the Grim Reaper, or if you look at the god of Saturn, you'll always see the same thing. You see the hourglass. That's the same thing that Shiva's holding down here. And so, essentially what we're looking at is the same concept. Of course, the Hindus are going to display it within their own symbolism, and the Western occultists are going to display it in their own vernacular, but at the end of the day, we're talking about the same God. We're talking about Father Time. We're talking about the one you can see here that he is holding time in his hand, and he is responsible for the time of the universe. Here in this bottom image, you see the god Saturn, who's sitting here waiting, and what do we see in the background? The planet Saturn. And he's got an hourglass in his hand with a sickle, because he is the reaper. And when the prophetic time has come, then he is going to come and he's going to reap the harvest. That is very analogous to who Shiva is. Shiva is this god of the universe who's responsible for time, and he is responsible for destroying an age and ushering in a new eon. He also has the symbol of time, and when it's time to bring in the new age, he does the apocalyptic dance, the dance of destruction. So the point I'm trying to make is that the same fallen angels of the Western occult system are the same fallen angels of Eastern mysticism. They look different, they have different names, but their symbolism is the same. That's why up here in the top right, we see, this is a very appropriate image right here. We see a fallen angel with wings who's sitting on top of the planet Saturn, because that is the spiritual principality associated with that cosmological body. Now in the next video, we're going to take a look at an important video that Cern produced called Symmetry. And in this video, it starts off, as you can see in the top right, they discover a dance of the cosmos. And then it shows a bunch of people doing the Nataraja, which is what Shiva does. And while they're doing the Doomsday dance, we see over here on the left that the Cern is fired up, and they shoot the subatomic particles towards each other. And within the video, we see a parallel world being opened up and entities coming in. So again, there's a lot of interesting symbolism. We just have to keep it all in context. So we know Shiva is the Lord of the dance. We know that Shiva is responsible for what they call dance trance or shamanic trance. That's where there's the shamanic drumming. Now, if you go into some African civilizations and South American civilizations where they have shamans and witch doctors and things like that, the shamans hit the drums in a very hypnotic way. And there have been studies that have even proved that if you hit the drums certain amount of beats per minute at a certain vibration and frequency, that you can actually put someone into a transcendental state, very similar to transcendental meditation. Now, we saw an example of this about 6-7 lectures ago when we did one on the band Godsmack. Godsmack in their video has a guy who's doing shamanic drumming. And as he's doing the shamanic drumming in the video, we see the spirit realm opening up, and we see demonic entities manifesting into our realm. So it's this same concept of opening you up to the spirit realm. Now, Shiva is responsible for bringing about this Kundalini spirit. Now, the Kundalini, we've talked about that lots in the past. That is a serpent. Here's an image of it in the bottom right. That serpent spirit comes into your body at the base of your spinal cord, and it travels up the chakras until it gets to the crown chakra in the head. This is the spirit that's needed to have out-of-body experiences, astral projection, reincarnation. They describe, electrical currents traveling up and down the spine. They have involuntary tremors and jerking of the body. And the reason why is because this spirit has now taken over the human body. It's in the central nervous system. It's now got access to the brain and the electrical wiring of the body and the mind and the neurologic plexuses. And so this is what the occultists are into. Every single occult group that we've studied throughout the Days of Noah series, 100% of them have been involved with Eastern mysticism, transcendental meditation, and receiving the Kundalini spirit. And just to prove that, when you look at Aleister Crowley, now he's a Western occultist, and yet he's still practicing Eastern mysticism. When Crowley started the Brotherhood of Saturn, he said that one of the initiation pathways for the Brother of Saturn to become bonded into the Order of Saturn, into the Brotherhood, was that they needed to go through an initiation process called Saturn Yoga. Now, why do you think they call it Saturn Yoga? He would go on to say that Saturn Yoga is a process where you open yourself up, you do satanic rituals and witchcraft focused on Saturn and on the spheres around Saturn, and as you open yourself up, you receive something called Saturnosis, which is equivalent to the Kundalini awakening, where the spirit comes in and it leads you to this process of enlightenment
through the crown chakra. So ultimately, Aleister Crowley's occult system was really based on Eastern mysticism. So they're all closely tied and connected. Now, essentially, the take-home message here is that the reason that they picked Shiva as a representation for Cern is because Shiva ultimately represents the ability to shatter the boundaries of space and time, which in doing so creates a doorway or an opening to an alternate parallel world or a realm or a universe. And the realm that's being opened is the doorway between us and the second heaven, or the spiritual realm where Satan and the demonic powers exist. Now, I'll give you an example of that. Goa Gill was an American-born DJ who was the founder of the trance dance movement, where he took electronic music and blended it with Eastern mysticism. And this was the origin of the rave era that we see in the 70s and 80s. Now, this guy was part of the 60s movement. He moved to India and he became a guru. He studied under a yogi and he learned how to do the transcendental meditation. Now, I want you to look what he documents here in one of his writings. When I come to a party and I set up my altar and I sprinkle the holy water, I recite the holy mantra, that's an Eastern prayer, and I make the offering to the cosmic spirit of Shiva. And then I start the music. Now the music and the whole party becomes an offering to this cosmic spirit. May Lord Shiva, Nataraja, Lord of the dance, come to this place and bless everyone. Then the dancers and the music and the DJ and the spirit, that's the spirit of Shiva, they all become one. And when after the offering, everything starts to move in one vibration, and it is as if a cosmic mind has come over the party and everyone becomes a part of it. So what he's describing here is he's describing a ritual. A ritual is where you have an altar, holy water, prayers, and a spirit. So he's doing a occult ritual dedicated to the cosmos, the universe, if you will, which in this context he's saying is Shiva, which is just another version of Lucifer or Satan. Doesn't Paul and John and them refer to Satan as the god of this world, or the god of this cosmos? So it's the same concept. And then once the ritual starts to take place, look what happens. Everybody's moving when one spirit, one vibration, a cosmic mind takes over the party, and everything becomes so perfect in the moment that you start to feel chills running up your spinal column. That is the Kundalini spirit entering into your body. And that feeling continues and it intensifies until it feels like a cosmic orgasm. And then in the best parties, boom, it comes like a supersonic electrical current of light that flashes through everyone simultaneously. See, supersonic, we're now breaking the boundaries of space and time. Something on a quantum physics level is happening. And it's an electrical current, that's the Kundalini, and notice that this light flashes through everyone. That's the false light. That's the counterfeit light that the scripture talks about. Doesn't Paul say that Satan masquerades as an angel of light? And is it any wonder that his followers also masquerade as ministers of righteousness? And so that's what we're dealing with here. Goa goes on to say that it's now up to those who've received it to nourish it and make it grow. That's when the seed is planted. So these people who are participating in this ritual now have allowed the Kundalini to come in. And if they begin to water that spirit, then that spirit's going to grow. It's going to lead them away from Christ. It's going to lead them away from biblical values and lead them into Eastern mysticism. Now, this is a very important thing he says here. These things happen during the course of the whole day. Sometimes it takes a while to exorcise all the demons and get the people moving in one vibration. When it happens,
It is as if space and time have disappeared and there is only being here and now. It's as if my heart is communicating directly with the heart of all the dancers, each one individually and yet all at once. So he's describing the fact that space and time have disappeared. What he's suggesting here is exactly the case. When you do a ritual, when you do a magic ritual, you're affecting quantum physics and you're opening up a doorway through the fabric of space and time, which allows demonic entities to manifest from the spirit realm into our realm. That's why they're in a trance. See here, in trance I found my freedom, my new religion. This trance dance that he's describing is the process of demonization. And here's a picture of him above. It happens through the third eye, through transcendental meditation, connecting with the Hindu gods, in particular Shiva. So, why are we going through all this? Because Shiva is the symbol for Cern, and that's what Cern's going to do on a much larger level. It's going to break the boundaries of space and time. It's going to open up a huge doorway, and eventually it's going to be used to open up the door to the bottomless pit. See this guy, Goa Gil, the one who's doing these rituals to Shiva? He's got his own band called the Namos. And look at the cover of his band. You got gray aliens with the typical gray hands. And if you look closely in the head of the gray alien, there's something underneath the mask. And it's a reptilian creature. Now, don't you think it's a little suspect that this is the cover art on his albums? All of these different symbols mean something. He's got the little avatar down here sitting in a Buddha-style pose. You know, an avatar in Hinduism means for a god or a deity to descend or cross over from the spiritual realm into the physical realm and to incarnate into a biological entity. That's what an avatar is. That's what the movie Avatar is. In the movie Avatar, they're able to take the spirit of a paraplegic and put it inside of an avatar. They take your spirit out and they move it over. It crosses over. Same thing with a genie in a bottle. It's all the same concept. And so that's what we're looking at. That's what Cern, that's why they're using Shiva for Cern. Cern is going to be used to allow the spiritual realm to manifest into our literal realm. See, these New Agers have been talking about Shiva for a long time. Shiva is synonymous with the Christ consciousness, the Lord Maitreya, the Imam Mahdi, which is the 12th Imam in Islam. Shiva, as you can see right here, who's also known as the Kalki Avatar or the Bodhisattva, is referred to as the world teacher, the coming one, the one who's going to come and liberate the world during the New Age movement, during the age of Aquarius, or what Aleister Crowley referred to as the Eon of Horus. So you can get tripped up by all the terminology, but it's all the same. It's all New Age, occult, Eastern mysticism, all blended into one. They're all just different nuances and facets of the same thing. And so this is why they're using Shiva as the symbol for Cern. That's a very important thing to understand. Now you've got people like Alice Bailey, who's one of the greatest occultists of all time. She spent years channeling all kinds of books and doctrines that would be used for the United Nations. She had her own publishing company called Lucis Trust. It was originally Lucifer Trust, but she got a lot of flack for that, so she had to have that altered to Lucis Trust, the light bearer. You can see the rays of illumination, the light that's being shown. She also belongs to the Theosophical Society that we see here, where you've got the Seal of Solomon, the six-pointed star. You've got the serpent eating its tail with a swastika in between. This is where all of the eugenics and the Adolf Hitler ideology comes from. Madame Blavatsky is the one who taught about the 6 root races that existed before the flood, Atlantean race and the Aryans. You know, all of this New Age ideology is all blended together with Nazism, etc. And so Alice Bailey taught that Shiva is this end time world teacher avatar who's going to come back to Earth from outer space and is going to liberate and save humanity. She's the one who channeled the great prayer called the Great Invocation. It's known as the mantram of the New Age. A mantram is an Indian Hindu prayer. And let's just see what the mantram has to say. When you invoke something, you're calling down a spirit from the spirit realm. So this is the Great Invocation, which is a representation of Shiva. From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into human minds, and let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into human hearts. May the coming one return to earth. This is not Jesus Christ, the Messiah, the anointed one, who fulfilled all of the hundreds of Old Testament prophecies, who was crucified, died, was buried, died, and resurrected and ascended into heaven according to the scriptures. That we're not talking about that Messiah. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide all little human wills, the purpose which the masters know and serve. This is the ascended masters of the brotherhood who are in communication with all of these entities. From the center, which we call the human race, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. If you know nothing about God, Christ, and Scripture, then you can get tripped up with the light and the love and the power. But make no mistake, they're talking about the Christ, the Lord Maitreya, the Christ consciousness, the avatar of Shiva, Buddha. They're talking about all of the ascended masters. And so that's ultimately what Cern represents. Cern is the technological fulfillment of the coming upon us of the age of Aquarius, the golden age, the age of Horus, and the manifestation of the New World Order beast system that's coming. That's what Cern ultimately represents, and that's why they're going to use it to unlock the door to the bottomless pit. And Cern is not the only place we see this symbolism. We see a lot of Hindu symbolism shrouded in America. For example, Shiva's consort goddess is known as Kali. Kali is the goddess that kills humanity by decapitating them and draining their blood out. There are many images of Kali holding multiple heads. Here we see the Empire State Building being lit up as Kali, with a tongue sticking out and the demonic red eyes and the third eye lit up in the middle. This is a picture of Kali up here, sticking her tongue out. Notice she has fangs if you look closely. Multiple serpents on both sides, which represent the Kundalini serpent spirit. The third eye is lit up with multiple other eyes, and she's holding a bowl full of blood. So there's a lot of Eastern mysticism shrouded throughout. Here we see on the cover of Newsweek, they're calling Obama the God of all things, and he's standing in the exact position of Shiva, juggling many different things in his hands as if he's some kind of god. So before we look at the video that Cern published, let's just shift gears a little bit. We've talked about Shiva, now let's talk about the Western occultism, because this is all going to become pertinent. The scientists claim that Cern is being used to uncover what they call dark matter and dark energy. Now, it turns out that scientists agree that when we look into outer space and we see all the planets and the suns, that all of that matter only makes up about 5% of the known universe. The rest of the universe is the dark matter and the dark energy. So for example, when you look over here to the right and you see this image, we see these stars. Those represent the matter. All of the blackness in between the stars is the dark matter and the dark energy. It's kind of like if you have a big bowl of soup, alphabet soup, and you've got some letters floating around in here. The letters represent the matter, the visible matter. All of the soup in between the letters is all of the dark matter and the dark energy, and it makes up anywhere from 75 to 95% of the universe. This dark energy and dark matter of the universe is connected to the spiritual realm. And this is exactly what Cern is trying to unlock and uncover. And so the occultists speak about dark matter and dark energy, and they attribute it to the planet Saturn. This is what the Brotherhood of Saturn had to say about Saturnian gnosis. That the darkness contains the light, and therefore the darkness is superior to the light. And that the light is activated within the matrix of the darkness by the logos, or the demiurge known as Saturnus or Lucifer. Notice how the scripture makes it clear in the New Testament that Jesus Christ is the logos. He is the word. But they have reinterpreted the logos to be this demiurge known as Saturnus, who at multiple times, Aleister Crowley uses that word synonymously with Lucifer. And that Lucifer was the one who spoke the words, "Let there be light." So they're saying that Genesis 1, the God who spoke the universe into creation, the one who illuminated everything in the world, is really Lucifer or Saturnus. And that he is the source of all this dark matter and dark energy. Now, they go on to say that the outermost station of this light is in the planetary sphere of Saturn. They teach that within our solar system we have two major opposing forces. One is this outward moving centrifugal force of Saturn, which they call the black sun. It's the one who's emitting the black energy and the black dark matter. The other force is the inward moving centripetal force of the literal sun that they refer to as the solar logos. So, from a cosmological occult standpoint, which you have to understand, occultists are into astrology and astronomy and astrobiology. That's all they study is the stars and the zodiac, etc. Basically, they claim that there are two forces operating in the universe, and that these forces represent balance, and they represent the concept of duality and opposites. This is where the yin and the yang come from. The black and the white, good and evil, light and dark, up and down, left and right, male and female. It's this concept of duality and opposites, and that there's a balance between the two. Now they go on to say that the earth is trapped within these two forces, and that humanity has gotten tripped up because they're looking at these forces as good and evil through a moral lens when there is no morality, according to Aleister Crowley. You do what you want is the whole of the law. If it feels good, do it. There's no morality. You don't have to be concerned with sin. He also said you don't have to be concerned with the afterlife. And so they don't perceive the universe as a conceptual concept of good and evil, but rather there's just light and dark and varying degrees in between. But in their mind, the darkness supersedes the light. Without the darkness, you couldn't see the light. The darkness makes up most of the known universe. The darkness makes up most of the dark energy. And so this will become relevant when we look at the video that Cern has published. It's a very interesting video, and you're going to see a lot of this representation of dark and light and this concept of duality. So let's try and put some things into perspective. Famous occultist Jack Parsons, nuclear physicist. He started Jet Propulsion's laboratory. He has a crater on the dark side of the moon named after him, known as the Parsons Crater. He was a follower of Aleister Crowley, and he got together with Ron Hubbard and did the Babylon Working Ritual in 1947. He said that Thelema magic, that is Crowley's Church of Thelema magic, was a magical type of force that was used to shatter the boundaries of space and time. In fact, that's exactly what he said about the Babylon working ritual. That was the goal, to shatter the boundaries of space and time using quantum physics, all through magic and witchcraft. Now, it was all based on something Crowley had done years in advance. Crowley and another woman did a magic ritual in 1918 in New York City, and they claimed to have tore a hole in the fabric of space and time and allowed a 3-foot gray alien by the name of Lamb who entered into their physical realm. You see a picture of Lamb down here on the bottom left. So first Crowley's figured this out. Then Jack Parsons and Ron Hubbard decide to run with it. They go ahead and do the Babylon working ritual, which, by the way, is a ritual designed to incarnate the spirit of Babylon from the book of Revelations, of all things. And they claim that they were able to successfully tear a hole in the fabric of space and time. Now, keep in mind, immediately on the heels of this, we see the Roswell incident and the birth of the UFO extraterrestrial movement a year later. And as I've demonstrated in previous lectures, this UFO extraterrestrial movement clearly is of a spiritual origin. So we see that these occultists have been able to help birth this movement. Now, these are just a couple of guys sitting around in a house or apartment doing some witchcraft with some 6-pointed stars and some, sex magic rituals. And they're tearing holes in the fabric of space and time. They're making doorways into the second heaven, big enough to let little aliens and other things in. Now we're talking about a 9 billion, 17-mile long underground tube that's deeper than a football field into the earth, that's shooting subatomic particles at the speed of light at several hundred degrees below freezing, something like 200 degrees minus Kelvin. This thing has the magnetic field, which is 100,000 times more powerful than the gravitational pull of Earth. And the scientists are saying that when these particles smash into each other, that they will create a black hole and shatter the boundaries of space and time. And these scientists admit that this is all for the purpose of trying to open a portal to an alternate dimension. And ironically, they're searching for something called the God particle, even though they're admitted atheists. And so when you put that into perspective, you can understand how Cern could be used to open up the mother lode of all black holes, connecting us to the second heaven, or the bottomless pit that's full of demonic entities as far as the eyes can see. And so when you see some of the symbolism, for example, over here we have a picture of Jack Parsons holding an explosive. They call him a strange angel. It has a picture of Saturn on the back. There's a picture of an hourglass, which represents the breaking of space and time, which is done by using witchcraft focused on the planet Saturn, which is known as the god of space and time. What do you notice down here in the bottom left? We see a statue of Buddha in the pyramids. We see an image of Shiva, the same one we see here, the god of destruction of the universe. And Shiva destroys the universe by opening up a doorway to a spiritual realm. So I hope you're being able to see some of the parallels here. So now you understand why they chose Shiva as a symbol for Cern. Shiva is the one who does the Nataraj. He's the Lord of the dance. When he does the dance, when his arms begin to move in circles as fast as possible, he opens up a doorway. He causes the fabric of space and time to be altered, and it opens up a dimensional doorway to the spirit realm so that the entities can come in and unite with humanity. Notice this picture up here of Cern. You can see the similarities, the different arms. You know, the center of Cern right here is this picture right here. But when you step back, you can see how it has a similar representation of these Hindu gods with all of the many arms, who spin their arms around in multiple circles until they destroy the world. And so some of the terminology that people have used is the concept of a stargate. They've said, is Cern really a stargate? And that's an interesting concept. Well, let's see what Hollywood has to say about this. So as it turns out, we have a movie called Stargate, and probably most of you have seen it. It's a pretty good movie. If you look at the cover over here on the right, starring Kurt Russell, we see a circular object. We see planets in the background, a film that unlocks the universe. The plot centers on the premise of a stargate, an ancient ring-shaped device that creates a wormhole, enabling time travel throughout the universe. The film's central plot explores the theory of extraterrestrial beings, having an influence upon human civilization. In 1928, in Egypt, of course, because we know that Egyptology is all part of the occult and the Illuminati, a linguist, Dr. Daniel Jackson, is invited to decipher an ancient Egyptian hieroglyph in the military facility. Soon he finds that the device was developed by an advanced civilization and that it opens a portal to teletransport to another planet. They find a land that recalls Egypt and humans in a primitive culture that worship and are slaves to the sun god Ra and Horus. Now it's interesting that we're seeing this movie regarding Horus because Aleister Crowley, who really birthed all of this occultism, he's the one who created the Church of Thelema. He understood that Thelemic magic was a force that could be explained through quantum physics, and he helped inspire the Babylon ritual, which was the purpose of shattering the boundaries of space and time. And he claimed that all of this was to help usher in a new eon, an eon that he referred to as the Eon of Horus. Later he goes on to admit that Horus is the sun god, who's analogous to the serpent, to Lucifer, to Saturn, and that he would help usher in the age of Aquarius. And the age of Aquarius is this new golden age where it would bring about this coming Messiah. And the coming Messiah would lead humanity to the fifth dimension where we would all evolve physically and spiritually to become like gods. And as gods, you can do whatever you want. Notice some of the parallels in the symbolism of this instrument here, which opens a wormhole, and this instrument here, which they claim opens a wormhole. Once again, we see that we're no longer dealing with science fiction, but we're dealing with science fact. This is truly the concept of art imitating life and vice versa. Everything we see on television is a prescription for what's in the future. My dad told me in the 1940s he used to watch Buck Rogers shows about flying a rocket ship to the moon. Now, that's old news. In 1980, I watched The Terminator, about a cybernetic organism that could look like a human. If you've seen any of the recent examples of some of the cyborgs that they've created that are humanoid, they exactly look like that. There are movies back in the 40s and 50s and 60s that talked about a worldwide brain where the whole planet would be connected. We call that the World Wide Web. 30 years ago, we watched a movie about a stargate that opened up a wormhole to another dimension. Now we're talking about a literal stargate that opens up a wormhole to another dimension. So as you can see, the Eon of Horus is upon us. The Eon of Horus, through Aleister Crowley's writings, is the last age of mankind before the birth of what we refer to as the Antichrist. That time is now. And as luck would have it, Cern just happens to be located over an ancient Roman temple called Apolliacum, in honor of the ancient god Apollo, who was believed to be a gateway into the underworld of all things. Now keep that in perspective as we read Revelation 9. The fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star fallen from heaven to earth, and to him was given the key to the bottomless pit. And he opened the bottomless pit, and smoke rose out like a great furnace. So the sun and the air were darkened because of the smoke. Then out of the smoke locusts came upon the earth, and they had a king over them, the angel of the bottomless pit, who in Hebrew is Abaddon, but in the Greek is Apollyon. So Apollyon is the Greek name for the angel of the bottomless pit, and Cern is located over a Roman temple called Apolliacum. It's actually located under it because Cern is underground, where they used to worship the god Apollo. What are the odds of that? Now we know Apollyon lets these locust scorpions come out of the pit. And it's interesting, when you start studying some of the occult writings, we see some similar ideas. For example, Kenneth Grant. He was the successor of Aleister Crowley. He wrote a famous book that's worth hundreds of dollars now on Amazon in 1980 called Outside the Circle of Time. What does that mean? Well, if time is running inside of a circle and you step outside of time, you're in an alternate universe. You're in a parallel dimensional world. And lo and behold, what does Kenneth Grant talk about outside of that circle of time? Ufology and insectoid creatures. How about H.G. Wells? He was a deep occultist. He was part of the Fabian Society, the Socialistic Club. He wrote a famous book, where in the book it describes going to the moon. And when they get to the moon, what do they describe living there? But these insectoid-looking creatures called selenites. Here's an image of one right here. If you start looking at a lot of occult literature, you'll see all kinds of imagery of insectoid locust-type entities. This is an image that a woman who claims to be in communication with her hybrid child drew. This is a woman who says that she was abducted by aliens. They took her to their ship. They extracted genetic material as well as reproductive material from her body, and they spliced it with an extraterrestrial and made a hybrid child. She draws this picture that she's telepathically communicating with these gray aliens and these insectoid beings. She also describes reptilians, and you see this sort of as above, so below imagery here with a portal that she's communicating them with. And so, as I've alluded to in previous lectures, that perhaps these locust scorpion creatures that come out of the pit are not a metaphorical concept, but literal entities. I realize that's hard to imagine and hard to receive, but what if we're dealing with something like this? And if that sounds outside the possibilities, the realm of possibility, then go back 2, 3, 4 lectures where we spend quite a bit of time looking at some of the writings of guys like H.P. Lovecraft, who was actually communicating with entities in the bottomless pit and drawing them in a grimoire called the Book of the Dead, the Necronomicon. And we see all kinds of weird hybridized creatures. So the question is Cern going to be used to rip a huge hole in the fabric of space-time, which will open up a black hole directly connected to the bottomless pit spoke of in Revelation 9, to allow the insectoid, locust, alien hordes to come through? When you look at a bottomless pit, like we see here, if John, the Revelator, was looking into the spirit and he sees a big black hole 2,000 years ago, what would he describe this right here? He might describe that a bottomless pit. So what I would say from years of studying Satanism, Luciferianism, the New Age movement, the extraterrestrial phenomenon, Eastern mysticism, is that every single one of them operate in a spiritual ideology that involves a component of shattering the boundaries of space and time through rituals to access the spiritual realm. And so it stands to reason that Cern, which was clearly inspired by the enemy, is going to be used to do that.
So that's it for today, guys. On our next video, we're going to look at a very important 2-minute clip that Cern produced. It's called Symmetry, and it is a dance and opera film that was made at Cern inside of the Large Hadron Collider. It has a lot of deep occult symbolism within it. I'm going to include the video in the description box. I think it's really important that everybody watch that video before we move on to the next lecture. See if you can spot some of the symbolism in it. And then on the next lecture, we're going to spend some time trying to break down that video. It's a complicated video. It involves everything from Enochian magic, which can be dated all the way back to King Solomon and the Seal of Solomon. That's all based on Jewish mysticism of the Kabbalah. The Kabbalah is basically sacred geometry. We're going to see that Metatron's cube and the cult of the black cube of Saturn are involved in Cern, and we'll show you that in the video. And all of this occultism and mysticism and magic is essentially going to provide the key to the fallen angel Apollyon described in Revelation 9. He's going to use this as the key to open the bottomless pit, which will open up a wormhole and shatter the boundaries of space and time between our four-dimensional time-space and the second heaven or the spirit realm where the bottomless pit is located. And in doing so, unleash literally the pits of hell to allow the scorpion, locusts, and all of the other supernatural demonic entities to begin to manifest from the spirit realm into our world. Now, I realize that that is some pretty wild things to say right there. That's pretty fanciful talk. And so now it's up to me and the Lord to produce the next video and try and back all that up. But I think you'll see as we begin to break down the symbolism that there is clearly a very deep, occult, hidden message embedded within the film Symmetry. So please go to the description box and watch that after this video, and watch it several times if need be. And then the next video we will try to break it down from top to bottom. So on that note, Godspeed, and we will see you on the next one.